So I asked, okay, if you don't have a financial statement, then show me where the money's coming from. How much is coming from ODOT? How much is coming from WSDOT? How much is coming from the feds? Is anything coming from C-Tran or Metro?
Sure, seems reasonable.
They're not able to, at least to date, they've not been able to provide the incoming funds from the money.
Seems kind of astonishing. Have you contacted the state auditor's office?
I've talked to somebody who we are planning that.
Okay. Because I assume they're subject to audits, financial audits by the state auditor?
If I can answer that question, I have had numerous conversations with the state auditor's office, both locally and at the Olympia, and they have referred, it appears that the CRC is not auditable by the state. They fall into this window where somehow the state feels like it's not their role. And so in fact, the Department of Transportation has gone through their own recent audit, and they said everything's just fine, that it's passed and muster just fine. And as a third party, a forensic auditor, are things just fine? Are they working the way they should?
When David hired me, I told him, I'm going to look through the documents. I'm going to tell you what happened to the money, and all of this smoke, all of these questions you have may be answered, and we can all just go away and realize that everything's fine. Maybe my work will uncover some anomalies and that we might need further investigated. And my hope really was that I'd be able to say, David, here's how all the accounting works out, and let me just explain it to you. Unfortunately, that's not happening yet. And I think one of my biggest concerns is the detailed documents we received from WSDOT, Washington State Department of Transportation. They gave us a download from their accounting system saying, here are all of our expenditures related to the CRC. Great. This is a great place to start. Their records indicated that through December 2010, they had spent $108 million. Of that, $15 million was not coded to a vendor, did not have a vendor name. Now, in the big enterprise accounting system, you can understand that, I can at least understand that there are times when you just have one-off expenses and you don't go through the process of setting up a vendor and doing that entire process. But to have $15 million of $108 million, nearly 15%, and a lot of these expenditures were really quite large, dollar amounts, that raised concern. And of that same $108 million, $38 million didn't have any sort of purpose, meaning it wasn't recorded to rent, it wasn't recorded to IT services or architectural or anything. So there's some really large gaping holes in Washington State Department of Transportation's accounting data that, as an accountant, gives me heartburn.
And those would be legitimate questions to raise with the state auditor, because the State Department of Transportation is audited by the state auditor's office.
Right.
With respect to the CRC not being auditable, I'm puzzled by that because they do audit local governments and special purpose taxing districts. You might ask for more clarification from the auditor's office as to why they believe it is not auditable, and perhaps the Attorney General's office, I know some people who work there, could help explain whether under current law it's auditable or not. We may conclude it's not. It depends with the way the law is written, but we could certainly look at the question, especially if the auditor asks us to, as our client.
One question I have, we have the Attorney General's office, and we have the State Auditor's office. The question is, what is the role of the Attorney General's office? Does the Attorney General's office, is the role to defend government or to defend taxpayers?
Well, it's both. This is a unique thing about any Attorney General's office or any prosecutor, because the county prosecutor defends the interests of the people of the county, but also is the civil legal the source of civil legal advice for that local government. So they represent the local agencies. In our case, we represent the Department of Transportation, but of course we keep an eye on them to make sure they're following the law, and we wouldn't protect them if they were not following the law and they refused to follow our advice to say, hey, you need to get right with it. And of course they do follow the law as far as we know. Sometimes some individual might not, but we we have clients that in good faith try to stay within the four corners. With respect to this kind of issue that you're describing regarding financial statements and so forth, that's within the province of the state auditor's office. So our role there is to provide legal advice to the auditor so that the auditor can do his job within his authorizing statute. And we'll help him understand what the parameters are. And if he came to us and said, hey, you got this special purpose district called the Columbia River Crossing, is it auditable or not? We would look at the relevant statutes and advise him on that. That would be our role in that case.
And my concern as an auditor, I think the biggest misnomer is this term audit and what that means. What an audit is your client, and perhaps the client is a governmental agency, perhaps it's somebody like US Digital. They hand you a financial statement and they say, here is our balance sheet, here's our assets and liabilities, here's our profit and loss statements, kind of money coming in, money going out for the year. You, Mr. and Mrs. Auditor, audit our numbers to make sure that they are reasonably stated. By not having a financial statement, there's nothing to audit. And so really, it seems to be my job, our job, is going to be to take all of these detailed documents and sort of create a financial statement for this entity.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And it's
now the law may not require them to have a financial statement, but that raises the policy question or begs the question of why not? And if the law currently doesn't require them to put together a financial statement on an annual basis, which is auditable, that would be an appropriate question to raise with state legislators who make the rules for these agencies, to ask them, why is it that you have a large multi-jurisdictional agency governed by a federated body of people who aren't elected but who are appointed to the governing board? Why is it they don't have to have auditable financial statements? And that if they're not required under the law, that's something that lawmakers can consider imposing.
Well, we have both audit and we have an investigation. An audit looks, do the numbers add up? Right. Does the math work?
Do they have financial controls in place that are adequate? Those are the kinds of things the auditor will look at.
What I'm curious about is appropriateness, reasonableness, ethics, conflicts of interest, relationships, those kind of things that a forensic investigator would be looking for, compared to more of a mathematical, have you followed the formulas kind of a thing. In this case, we've pretty much run into a dead end up to this point. I've been asking for information since last year, October last year. We still do not have a master vendors list. We don't have the most fundamental information. In fact, it appears that this agency, this entity, the CRC, whatever this hybrid that it is, even though we've sat down with Nancy Boyd, the new head down there, says that they are accountable, says that they believe in transparency. No one is taking the role of holding them accountable. Who do they report to?
I don't know that much about the CRC yet, but I'll be learning a lot about it over the coming 17 months. It's a very important issue for the people of Southwest Washington.
Very much so.
So I look forward to those opportunities and talking to a wide array of people about it. I assume they have some sort of governing board that oversees that project?
Actually, they do not. They used to, but they do not.
Oh, they don't have one right now?
Not
so they don't have a
years.
Sound Transit Board, they don't have a Clark Transit Board, et cetera?
No, they do not.
So who do they report to?
That is a very good question.
Probably the head of the Washington DOT and the Oregon DOT to some extent?
Well,
I think they're
Tiffany, you made a trip to talk with the legislators in Salem a couple weeks ago. What did you find? I assume that we've been told locally by the city council here in Vancouver that, hey, we're not the ones to talk to the legislators. And so you've gone and talked to the legislators. What did they tell you?
Oh, I think the biggest, when we went to Salem, the most astounding thing to me was they were actually voting that day on budgetary items, one of them being for ODOT, and they didn't know what the CRC was. I was just trying to give them some information as to what my questions were. I had to back all the way up and explain what the CRC was, that they physically sat in an office in Vancouver. I had to literally walk them through what it was that they were even voting to put money towards, and the fact that we don't have financial information related to that. And it's my understanding that they put in sort of some oversight as far as requiring reporting and that sort of thing back to ODOT. But those legislators were very, I was the educator that day as to, you know, what the CRC was and what they were voting on and what this project was supposed to do,
right,
and sort of the problems that are still with it.
So they're not reporting to the legislators of,
no, they're not.
Of Oregon, and it appears not Washington. And so they're not reporting to anyone other than the governor that says move forward on this program. Really, it appears over the objection of our local citizens. We don't have a voice in this. We cannot vote on this. There's no way. In fact, you may know that we have a mayor that was elected mainly because he opposed this project in the form of tolls. And as soon as he got elected, he turned out to be the exact opposite. And he's the largest promoter of this project. There are really four key individuals. There's 2 state governors, the mayor of Portland, and the mayor of Vancouver. And yet the citizens are denied a vote. The citizens are denied access. There's no accountability. So I'm interested more in your role as Attorney General to see what, because we don't know who else to go to. The state the auditor's office is really not helping us.
Right.
If they audit local agencies, well, this is not local. Maybe that's the window.
Well, you would go, you've mentioned a couple of the people you would go to. You would go to the governors who are elected, and as elected representatives are accountable. That doesn't mean they're going to agree with you, but they are there to serve the people who are the voters in their states. The other group, of course, are the legislators who act as a check on the governor, on the executive branch. And so I would recommend the transportation leaders in the legislature, the budget leaders in the legislature. You have Joe Zarelli, Senator Zarelli from the 18th District, who's very, very good. And I would recommend starting with him. I don't know which legislators you have down here who serve in the transportation committees, and you may already be talking.
We have Ann Rivers. We have new state legislators,
right,
which are very good, but they feel powerless because they're in the minority.
Well,
the question is, as Attorney General of our state,
yep,
what can you do to help us here in Clark County? We feel like we're being run over by this program. The current governor is, regardless of what we say,
right,
it's full speed ahead.
Right.
Spend as much as you can, get this done as quick as you can. Where can we turn? You're our state attorney general. What can you do to help us?
Well, I can team up with the state auditor because he has jurisdiction here over the financial issues. We can answer questions and provide analysis of the law and tell you, what this creature is, this CRC under the law, and where the accountability is. We do represent the State Department of Transportation. It's our assigned role. Just like you have a lawyer who represents you in your business, their lawyer is the Attorney General's office. So we can't take actions that are inimical to their interests, but we are responsible for helping to hold our clients accountable as well. So we can't expose them.
Well, I'm curious because
we can take a look at what they're doing.
So your role, as it's defined by the state constitution, is to defend the Department of Transportation up to a degree.
Up to a point.
Right. And the question is, at what point what threshold has to be crossed?
When we believe they're not following the law and they refuse to come into conformance with the law.
And how would we know that?
Well, we would reach that conclusion if we looked at a particular activity and decided that it was outside of the statutory authority that agency has. And so there, for any agency, I mean, I have no evidence that DOT isn't doing everything right with the CRC, but if a citizen came to me about any agency and said, hey, we think they're outside of the boundaries, we would want to take a look at that.
And I have a similar issue with the SAO, or State Auditor's Office. If I was a big accounting firm and my client had a fraud or a litigation matter, I could not, as their CPA, also then do their fraud investigation or conduct, go and testify as their expert witness in court. They'd have to get a neutral person because I'm auditing them. The SAO's job is to audit the Washington State Department of Transportation. So then to have them also defending and or doing the investigative work could be a conflict as well, although they may have the resources to help us. But